Let's do this.
All
Yes.
right.
I like seeing the numbers keep going up. It's kind of, just so that gets me excited every single increase in number. So welcome. Thank you so much for taking some time in this afternoon to join us to have a conversation around neighborhoods and public space, particularly streets. I am going to introduce, well, the topic and then introduce the team, and we can get started with the presentation. Peter, you can go ahead and bring up the slides. All right, so this broader initiative is called Reimagining Neighborhoods and Streets. It's really about creating community spaces together. We've learned a lot from the pandemic that we want to bring forward into a community conversation to really reimagine how our streets can better serve us, both as social hubs, to foster economic development, and to really steward environmental functionality of our right-of-way of our streets. Next slide, please. But before we get into to talking about streets, I want to talk about that we're all visitors on this land. I'd like to read the land acknowledgement reminding us of our temporary nature of our inhabitants here. So we acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohomish people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes, who since time immemorial have hunted, fished, gathered, and taken care of these lands. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and the water. I also want to take a moment, if you haven't seen the news, I would just want to take a moment and give, as we all gather as a community, to feel the grief that other communities may be feeling or will be feeling, both from last week in terms of the Buffalo shooting, as well as the really unfortunate incident and shooting in Texas today. So just a moment, if you guys don't mind, if you ladies don't mind taking a moment. All right, thank you for that. Next slide, please. Shifting gears, though difficult. I want to talk about the broader project goal of reimagining neighborhoods and streets. It is often said that public space is the great equalizer, and that certainly has great potential here in the city of Edmonds, where 77% of our public space is made up of streets. Many perceive streets as only serving a mobility purpose, because that for decades is what we did. We focused on really moving people through our neighborhoods, through our streets, through our cities. But really, we need to recognize, and the pandemic did a great job of reminding us, that public spaces are really the living rooms as well. They're the gardens, they're the playgrounds of urban and suburban areas throughout our country. Like I said, the pandemic really emphasized the need for public space, where people can really gather safely outside for a myriad of reasons that I've just mentioned: to eat, gather, to play. They can serve as instrumental for urban and suburban transformation. So the project goal is really this: to envision what the streets of tomorrow will look like. What will they feel like? Who will they serve? In keeping with that and hearing the conversation from the community, we will develop new street and public space designs that will really guide how the future of our streets are built to serve the communities. And then finally, in listening to these conversations, we'll create a public space activation toolkit. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. What is activation? To foster social interactions that really support vibrant neighborhoods and also support economic development. And so we're gonna dive into, what does public space activation mean? So hold that thought. But before that, I really want to just talk a little bit about the project schedule. So this next slide is not meant to scare you, but it is meant It is meant to show you that there are actually, it's a full breadth of body of work here to create new street designs for the city of Edmonds that serve all users with really supporting complete streets principle. Those will come with nice illustrations. We will show how the right of way, how the street is allocated to support different users of the right of way, including public spaces, in which we're going to talk about today. So the key takeaway from this project timeline is that the project's multifaceted. The project has significant community involvement. There's going to be many touch points that you're going to be able to be involved. So thank you for coming on this particular day, but just know that this will not be your last chance, and we please hope that it will not be. The project will last through the end of the year, and we will have actual tangible deliverables that will help shape our city moving forward, that will go hand in hand as we develop the comprehensive plan to guide the vision of our city over the next 20 years. So what does that look like for just the public space piece? So that's what you're seeing here. Let's zoom in to the topic of public space and creating new public space types and activation strategies. We are here in the orange. We're on the upper left. If you have trouble with colors, some people do. The upper left, we are at the kickoff workshop on activation strategies. Again, activation, what do we do with the space in which we have to better serve us? Following this kickoff workshop, we are going to be in person. So if you're not a big fan of virtual, don't worry. We're just as excited to see your faces in person and to dive into really conversations at the neighborhood level. We will have 6 different neighborhood conversations in your neighborhoods. We are working on venues for that right now, but just know that it will be in June. Ideally, that's the goal. And then downtown, we'll have a separate in-person workshop as well in June. And then, so those that we'll be able to talk a little bit more in detail. And then we'll also follow that up with neighborhood roundtable conversations that will go into July. So what are pilot projects? We're looking to really expand the vocabulary of our communities to talk a little bit more about what they want to do within our streets to support public space. And we're offering an opportunity for each of those neighborhoods to test out an idea. And what that idea is could be a myriad of things. So I don't even want to use an example because we're going to see a raft of examples from our consultant team today. City Council and Planning Board is going to be a critical component to these conversations. And so we will be presenting our findings to the City Council as anticipated by the end of this year. Next slide, please. So let's talk about today. We have an hour and a half minus 13 minutes. So the goals for this workshop today. We want to learn more about public space. What are we talking about exactly? We want to make sure we're all on the same page using the same language. This does not need to be planning wonky terms. Let's make sure everyone has the right vocabulary to have a community conversation. We're going to learn about some public space activation strategies, and we're going to discuss how Edmonds specifically may utilize its public spaces differently, both in the downtown and at the neighborhood scale. We want to generate interest. That's a key goal of this workshop, about how you can become involved in downtown and neighborhood level activation strategies. And finally, and I hope I've already said this will not be the last time, we want to raise awareness about how you can continue to stay involved in this conversation, because that's the whole point, bringing people together in public space to improve livability of our neighborhoods and collectively our city as a whole. So who's at the helm? So before we kick this off, let's see who is our project team. So next slide, please. My name is Susan McLaughlin. I can't believe I've waited how many slides to actually introduce myself, but there you go. I just realized I jumped right in. You can see how eager I am on this subject matter. So Susan McLaughlin, I'm the Director of Development Services here at the City of Edmonds. I have with me as a core project team, Brad Shipley. He's a senior planner with our planning division. And Kelsey Foster, who's been a key component to our team so far, communication strategist and PIO. Here with us from Environmental Works is Peter Cromwell. He is the project manager. He's waving on screen right now if you can see him. Nick Morin, who is the landscape director, and also Jess Zimbabwe, who's the executive director. Environmental Works is not new to the city of Edmonds. They have been involved in lots of conversations, particularly recently, some on the waterfront. Green Futures Lab is also not new to the city of Edmonds, and they are supporting Environmental Works. This is a collaborative with the University of Washington. So Lori Heeland is the project manager. Daquan Proctor is a professional assistant with the Green Futures Lab. And of course, Nancy Rottle, the director of the Green Futures Lab, will be supporting this project. So really excited about our project team. And on that note, I'm going to kick it off to Jess Zimbabwe to take it from here.
Excellent. Thanks, Susan. Hey, I'm Jess. And so we're going to get started. We're going to move into breakout conversations in a little bit after we give you some of the background information that Susan promised about public space. But we want to get people engaged now. So as a starter warm-up, we wanted to do a couple little interactive activities. And the way that we're going to do that is using this website called menti.com. Pete, if you could leave that slide up for just one more minute.
Sure.
And so menti.com is a website. If you're sitting at a computer right now, you can go to a browser and go to menti.com, but also Menti is set up really well to work on a phone. It's designed to work on the little screen. So if you've got a phone next to you, you might find it just as easy to go to menti.com on your phone in a browser. And then at the top of it, it's just going to be a simple website. It's going to ask you to enter a numeric code. And the code for this little set of, so we're going to do 3 polling questions, and the code for tonight, and this is the only time you'll have to enter it in, is 95023857, and that will take you to this poll. So now I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to start our polling. So the first polling question that'll pop up, you see it here, but it should be also in your phone, is what excites you most about this meeting? What brought you here? You can just type those words into the box in Menti. It gives you 3 options, but you can do multiple times, I think. And so we're starting to see people's answers. A lot, and so this diagram that you're seeing live move in front of you is being generated by everyone's answers they're typing in right now. It's changing every time someone adds new answers, it's changing. And so what it's also doing is it's representing words larger that multiple people have entered. So the most people have entered this word community. That's why we see it largest and in the center. But we also see innovation has been entered a few times. There's a lot of other ideas here: futuristic, outdoors, transparency. We see that there's a mix of feelings, which is normal, right? But so we see there's some distrust here. There's ideas of being a watchdog. There's also curiosity. There's ideas of collaboration, hope, sociability. So that's great. Thank you all for that. And next, we're going to go to the next question, which you also should pop up once you answered that first question. The second question is, what do you think of when you hear public space? So what comes to mind? And you can enter, if you put 2 words, like for instance, someone entered open areas. If you have 2 words with a space, when you put it in the same box, it shows up as one answer here. So it's pretty smart about capturing people's ideas. So gathering space, parks, green, a beach. Yep, it's a great fortune of a community like Edmonds to have a beach counted in its public space network, right? Plazas, parklets, safety, seatings, gardens, open areas, eco-friendly. Yep, a lot of great ideas here. We see community again. Great. That is excellent. And the last polling question we're going to do for right now, we'll come back and do another 3 questions at the end of this, but the third one we'll do right now is, what do you think of when you hear street activities or events? So what comes to your mind? If you close your eyes and think about street activities, what's taking place there? Pedestrians, parades, street closures, markets, a race, a special event like that, music, outdoor dining, street fairs. Yes, this is a group of people that have spent some time in good, active streets. All right, thank you all. So we'll come back to this Menti, so you can just set your phone down and it'll still be there when you come back to it once you've entered that code. But I'm going to stop sharing this now and we'll go back to the slideshow and we're going to talk a little bit about that public space and what it looks like. Because we want to make sure when we go into these breakout rooms that we have some shared vocabulary, and there are some terms that it's useful to just all be on the same page about before we do it. So first of all, there's this term, this sort of a term of art, the right of way, which is not perhaps obvious to you, but it's that entirety of the space that runs from the outside edge of one sidewalk to the outside edge of the next sidewalk. So it includes sidewalks, any sort of plaza or parklet type spaces. It also includes the strip of land between the sidewalk and the street, includes the entire street right of way. And we're also going to talk a little bit about, we'll go through this diagram, some other places where activation might take place that are adjacent to that, the street or the right of way. But so if you see this diagram here, there's the three-dimensional diagram that's showing you, we'll pop through what different parts of that are. There's also alongside of it, a section, which is like if you took a knife and you sliced through the middle of the street, straight down into the earth. That's what this bottom left diagram is showing you. So it's a section of the street. So it's showing you here, we've sliced through this section, there's a sidewalk on either side of it. There's a planting strip then next to each of those sidewalks. This particular street, all streets are different. This street has a parking lane on one side of it. You may know a street that has parking on just one side. Some streets have a parking lane on two sides. This street has two travel lanes. And this one is quite common. The travel lanes are 11 and 10 feet in width, just to give you a sense of the scale of that. And then on the other side, there's a planting strip and a sidewalk. So let's flip through just to show some different parts of this. So different ways that we can activate this public realm. One place is the intersection of two different streets. There are some places where this doesn't make that much sense. Often where there's a state highway or an arterial involved, it can be complicated to close down an entire intersection, even for a temporary event. But there are some places, maybe in neighborhoods, where there's an intersection where that makes more sense. So that's in the menu of possible parts of the right of way that we might be able to activate. Next up, we have street, right? When we close a street for a farmer's market or for a special event, street fair, we're using the entirety of that volume. It's, as Susan was just mentioning, it's not just for the throughput of automobiles, it's about occupying that and activating it with people. And so we've seen how that's changed over the pandemic. That's certainly going to be in our menu that we're looking at later in the activation strategies. Next up, there is, I mentioned on this one street that we're slicing through, there's only parking on one side of it. You may be familiar with streets all around that have parking on both sides of it, but there is that sort of a flexible lane or the parking stalls, right? So that flex lane or parking stalls is what we're calling the zone of space that's not used for cars moving through, is sometimes used for cars to park, but could be occupied differently, right? Through parklets or other activations. Next up. This is the one I think there are the most different terms for. I think in Seattle, we call it the planting strip. If you come from other parts of the country, this is called all different things. It's called the tree park, the tree yard. Yeah, there's different ways to call this, but the median or the planting strip is a sort of often vegetated, so often with some green plant material growing in it, little bit of land in between the surface that you walk on the sidewalk and the surface that cars are driving on. So it can often serve as a buffer between them, but it's also a place where art can be, where little free libraries can be, sort of small scale interventions can take place in that dimension of space. Next up. And then of course the sidewalk. We have to maintain sidewalks to walk through, but there's a lot of space in some of our sidewalks. Some of our sidewalks can accommodate benches or seating or other temporary or permanent activation. So we'll see some other examples about things that can take place on the sidewalk itself. And then next, we wanted to talk about alleys. So not every neighborhood has alleys, but some neighborhoods do. And that alley network can be a really rich place where those activations can take place because it can be a place to draw interest. And so we'll look at some examples of those alleys that have been activated from other places. And so with that, and we'll see these diagrams again, because we'll refer back to them when we're talking about where these activations can take place. But with that, I'm going to kick things over to Nancy, who's going to talk about activation in public space.
Actually, it's going to Lori.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Good.
Yeah. So go
Sorry about that.
ahead, Lori. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so just a few words to continue on the public space activation. And a lot has been said already, but So technically, what is public space activation? It's an invitation or creating opportunities for public to use the public space, as it's been overviewed a little bit already. So next, please. Why activating public space? So supporting community social life is a very important goal, and activating public space is a very fruitful way to do that. And we will see some images very soon on ideas. It's also creating more places for enjoyment. And especially during COVID, I think we've been all reminded of the entertainment and joy of having more spaces to be together outside. And it's also a way to make public space safer and more livable. And so in order to present you this in more details, next slide, we also have investigated a few other places, and there are several cities, large and small, in the US, but also abroad, that have implemented specific public space activation programs, which are often part of public works or transportation departments, all recognizing the value of using the right of way for many uses, including as a place to build a community social life or to create safer and livable public spaces. So these are just very few examples of strategies that includes also Boston and Vancouver, BC, on alleys that you have on the photos here. Next, please. So the way we have broke down the activation strategies we wanted to introduce to you is by location and time. So Jess has been presenting an whole set of locations where all this possibility can happen, like the full street, flex lane, intersection, planting strip, sideways alleys, and these are all places where smaller areas of interest can be activated. And we choose to present this activation characterized by their timing. Some can happen weekend long, or it could be a day long event. It could also be a one-time special event or after hours or during business hours. And so all of these strategy will be presented through the place where they can happen and at what moment they could happen as well, to give you a full range of ideas and inspiration. And I'm going to turn to Daquan, who's going to present you those strategies.
Hi, everyone. I'm Daquan. I'm just going to walk you guys through each of these locations one at a time, looking at the 4 different time periods. This provides one example for each of these, but I want to make it clear that there are a wide variety beyond the already large portion that we're showing you guys that we can use to activate these spaces. And also, if you feel like we're going through them quickly, you'll have access to these photos later in the breakout rooms to reference back to. So starting first with intersections, again, we want to make emphasis that this is primarily in non-arterial streets. You can get the next slide. So some examples are community art events like painting street murals during business hours. Some popular after-hour events are block parties. And you also have some special events like holiday festivities that are more seasonal, and some more permanent activations such as pavement to plaza, essentially where you take an intersection and you temporarily convert it into a plaza. And that can be sort of a pilot for eventually turning that into a more permanent plaza down the road. Next slide. Next, we're going to talk about streets. So a really popular one for business hours is bringing food trucks in. It could be just 1 or 2, or you can bring a whole full street full of them and have a food truck festival. One that a lot of you are probably familiar with are the markets. These can be all different types: farmer markets, maker markets, flower markets. Another popular one that might be more applicable to residential areas are close and play streets, essentially where you close down a portion of the street to make it more friendly for play so that cars can't come through. And one of my favorites are movie series, which you can close down a whole street and pop up a big projector and really have these reoccurring community events. These are some more examples of special events, just because streets are so conducive to that. So you can have street concerts, beer and wine festivals, marathons, and even more fun active events like street skating. Next, we're going to talk about that flexible lane or the parking stalls. So just that small portion of the street. One that you all are probably familiar with are the streeteries or outdoor dining, in which a small portion of parking spots are taken over to have outdoor space to eat. A kind of reflection of this that's more geared towards retail is you could have also outdoor retail, in which retailers could have space along those parking strips to display their merchandise as well. Some more public suiting ones are public seating, which are separate from businesses, and so you would have access to that all day round. And another special event would be like a street game tournament. And these are some other examples of activations in that flex lane. You could have exercise equipment, mobile and bike parking, and temporary benches. And in the planning strip or medians, there's also a series of activations. Some include parklets, which are conducive to the vegetative nature of the planning mediums. And you can also have community gardening and landscaping, in which community members are taking a more active role in forming the landscape of the street. And we can also enhance those natural elements with street art. And you can also have something more seasonal like flower festivals. Sidewalks are another popular space to activate. One popular one could be a bike hub or repair station where you could either put air in your tire, park your bike, different types of things like that, fill up your water bottle. Some ones that are more conducive to after hours or weekends are temporary buskers or street performers, and things that can be present all day long, and especially more in residential areas as well, are things like little free libraries or community cleanup events. And lastly, we have alleys. Alleys aren't necessarily the most inviting place off the top of your head, but they can have a variety of activations that make them safe both during daytime and nighttime and become lively hubs. Some examples are alley dining, artistic lighting, which is really enhances the safety feel at nighttime. And then also murals, and you could also have kind of informal alley parties and mixers and different events that need a smaller space that wouldn't be needing a big venue. All right, and that's kind of the suite that we put together for now.
Thank you so much, Daquan. That's fantastic, and certainly gives us a wide range of ideas to kind of pull from and engage with in our small group discussions and our breakout sessions. So we can't wait to hear from you. But I just want to let you know that Edmonds is not new to these ideas. So some of you may be saying, yeah, we've done it, particularly around Ed, our business improvement district. You do wonderful jobs. Thank you so much for activating our downtown. Certainly you are going to be the group of stakeholders we can learn from, not only from downtown, but also what's worked and what hasn't, and we can bring that into our neighborhood districts. So thank you for participating today. And so, we've also applied this in concept with the 4th Avenue Arts Corridor, and really looking at ways to engage with the cultural and physical arts in downtown. And then away from downtown, the Westgate and Five Corners, really re-envisioning the public realm or public space in those neighborhood plans, along with Highway 99 as well. Making it more challenging, I'm not going to lie, from a typology perspective, because Highway 99 is that large format parcels. But yeah, how do you make that public realm a little bit more livable? And then going to downtown with walkable Main Street for the 2 years predominantly in the heart of that, or the heart, there's no heart to the pandemic, shoot, to the middle of the pandemic, let's just say, and then finally, with streetery programs in which many of you have engaged in community conversations around, and I do believe we've learned a lot from both the good and the bad, the challenging perhaps. So Edmonds, again, not new, but where can we go from here? So looking forward to hearing from you. Next slide. Peter, are you going to take this one?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. So far, we have been presenting some of the background information of where we're talking about public space activation and what we're talking about. And now we're going to go into breakout rooms to have a little bit more of community conversation around what we've been showing you so far. So as we do that, a couple rules: keep it short and simple when you speak, respect the ideas of others, embrace criticism and speak up for others. And maybe one other thing that's not on here, or two other things that are not on here, is that try to do two before you. If you've spoken up, try to let two other people speak before you speak again. And then remember that active listening is as important of a part of this conversation as sharing your ideas. The goal here is for everyone to get a chance to speak so that we can hear our whole community voice. So with that, I'm going to open up all the rooms. We'll see you in there in just a second. All right, welcome back through the time warp, everyone. It can always be a little bit jarring to be sucked back from a breakout room into the main group, but fantastic work in there. We're glad to have you all back. We're going to be doing a share back now. So we're hopefully you all the groups were, excuse me, able to assign a person or two who can share a little bit about the conversation that you had in your groups. So Daquan, group one, who from that group was going to share with us?
We're going to have Jill and what's the other? Lisa share for our group.
Jill and Lisa, you should be able to unmute yourselves whenever you're ready.
I guess I should have written notes. I'm going to steal Jill's idea since I'm going first. In that she said she wanted to have a focus on the neighborhoods and making sure that her neighborhood gets involved in moving ideas forward. And she'd also like to see a toolkit of like a flyer that she can use to communicate with neighbors, and emails and things that she can help, that we can use to help get our neighbors involved in these activities, activations. And we also, oh, thanks. We talked about getting more bike lanes, and we really enjoyed seeing people being mobile and actively walking and biking to school during the pandemic. And so it would be nice to have, but now that cars are speeding down the streets and more visible, it's not as easy to bike and walk around, and we'd like to see more dedicated space to allow people and kids especially to bike and walk to school, and families to walk around and bike around. Jill, what am I missing? Well, I'll keep talking.
We may have lost Jill.
Okay, I'll keep talking.
That's okay. We should probably do about 2 minutes per group, which gives us about 12 to 15 minutes for everyone to present, which I think is just about right. So why don't we go on to group two?
Thank you, Lisa.
Peter, if you just navigate over to on that board, we're right next door there, and there was a motion and a seconded, and my friend Clayton is going to report back from our group.
Fantastic. And thank you so much from Lisa and Jill for sharing group one. And I think you said Clayton was going to share.
That's right.
Yeah, hi.
Perfect.
Thank you, Jess, for putting me on the spot. I appreciate that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not prepared, but I thought the interesting thing about our conversation as a group was we kind of migrated away from any focus on a specific event or food trucks or what all these really cool things that I really want to get to. And we kind of look towards more of the process. Like, how do you create a master plan that could anticipate any obstacles with any particular really cool idea? not only the obstacles, but then plan for success so that you look at the big picture and have a guide, a map or a path towards achieving the goals once those goals are identified. So once that model is established, then you can bring in the food trucks, bring in music in the streets, or whatever the concept may be, and then develop a plan for success.
That's great, Clayton. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks.
Was there anything else? Should we move on to group 3? Okay. I think this was Nick and Brooks' group. Who would like to share from group 3?
So I'm going to share some of group 3, and this is Laura, and then please everyone that was there jump in if I'm not saying everything or if I'm missing any point. So one of the idea that was presented in the conversation, I believe that was maybe Trisha, that the idea of festivals movie night was nice for several people, but she mentioned that more than festival or group events, maybe smaller events like block parties could be nice so that people could actually get to know each other on a more intimate way. Another interesting, let me get back to the other ideas that was discussed is that alleyways could be a nice way to activate places, and that was a new ideas. And the alleyways next to the movie theater downtown was mentioned as a potential good opportunity. But it was also mentioned that this is a very general discussion so far, and it would be easier to get more specific once we get into the details of each neighborhoods, because some neighborhoods can allow specific activities, while some others may have difficulties, like Five Corners was mentioned, with some difficulties to organize things on streets, while sometimes topography also works again, more walkability. And please jump in if you would like to add something to that.
This is Judy, and I'll just add one thing, and that is that there are a few of us who thought that the neighborhoods needed more attention than the downtown.
Yes, thank you.
That's great, Judy. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Stay tuned for the next meetings. We will be digging into those neighborhoods. Group 4, and I apologize. I think this was Nick and Brooks' group. Thank you, Lori, for presenting for us.
No problem. I think I'll present on behalf of this group. And again, if I miss anything, please let me know and jump in. So we talked at length about the how use of public space has changed over the last 2 years. And there's quite a range. You know, some have avoided others, as you know, you would expect during the pandemic. I think that could lead to walking in different parts of downtown. And when walking, just really being exposed to a range of accessible routes, in some cases, routes that aren't maintained very well, and just being particularly sensitive to that, and recognizing the importance of you know, all walking routes being supported and maintained for all users. There's a mention of streeteries being used, and I think the joy that comes from that, but also a little bit of concern about the visual aesthetics of the streeteries, and that it would be nice to see some design standards around that. In terms of the scale and which activation strategies excite people the most, there was a pretty clear message that, you know, the vast majority of Edmonds is suburban in scale, and that we need to include more activation strategies that are responsive to that texture and that environment. that, one of the ideas for activating that space could be as simple as block parties that are arranged by neighbors and community members, ideally, permitted and obviously vetted amongst the community so that we're respectful of everyone, including those who like their quiet. One idea that was put out was how wonderful it would be to have a noise-free day as an activation strategy. One of our participants mentioned what it was like to live in Europe, where they don't allow you, in a neighborhood where they didn't allow you to use blowers or mow your lawn on Sundays, and how wonderful that is. A couple other ideas that came up were how much more activation there is on the interurban trail there was during the pandemic, and trying to tap into that. And the just being able to appreciate the marshland areas in town, and with walking pathways, maybe more walking pathways, and just ways to connect with nature in general. Some of the barriers that were noted are just kind of being mindful of the fact that downtown has a very unique texture, and that some of the commercial areas outside of downtown don't necessarily have the storefront retail that you see in the downtown area, and keeping track of the fact that private parking lots present some good opportunities that we should pay attention to.
That's great. I sounds like your group had a really rich conversation, and I know there are other people, but I want to make sure that we hear the other groups too. We've got 10 minutes left in our meeting. So I am going to go to group 5. Who wants to present from group 5? Brad, I think this was your group.
This is
Go
Randall.
ahead, Randall, you going to do it? I'd love for you
I
to.
might have volunteered myself there. Yes.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Take the reins, Randall.
All right. My name's Randall Hodges. I own Randall J. Hodges Photography in Main Street. And we had a lot of varied topics, but I'll try to go with the ones that were mentioned the most. One, for me and a couple other business owners, walkable Main Street was not a thing that we want to see happen, at least not on regular basis. And for me personally, definitely not on Saturdays. It was mentioned that when the Civic Park is completed, that should be what is activated for events and things. It was also mentioned by many that parking is a problem. So actually closing streets and taking it away might not be the best way. And a lot of our group really was interested in improving sidewalks, especially out of the downtown core and walkable areas, and making them safer. And a lot was said about that, and some was said on improving the Highway 99 district. And I think that's what I remember from it.
Thank you so much, Randall. I really appreciate you sharing that back with us. And for group 6.
Yeah, and Mike Rosen, you were nominated, I think just as we were closing. Would you like to report back, or is that too much of a surprise for you? I think you're still in the meeting. Mike Rosen? Oh, maybe he's not here still. All right. Anybody else from group 6 who would like to report back? Maybe I'll do it then.
Thank you, Nancy.
I would say, like Nick's group, we had quite a range of experiences and opinions, that some people really used public space during the pandemic, using the streeteries, being able to pick up food, and other people did not. They stayed home, and that was, how they made sure that they stayed safe. In terms of what activation strategies people were most excited about, it balanced between making sure there was easy parking and easy access, maybe some shuttles or community transit to get people around, and especially to the downtown, but also really an eloquent expression of the kinds of events in the neighborhoods that would promote safety and caring for each other, and bring the community together. That would be maybe landscaping, seating, and parklets. At the downtown, there was, I think, concern. Well, let me just say there was quite a bit of approval, I would say, of the streeteries and the parklets. But like Nick's group said, they would really need to be made more permanent, better designed, as opposed to being so ad hoc. And there was a suggestion that, yes, using the streets, but maybe not the whole street for public space activation, so that Owen Lane can remain open, and that also evening use of the streets for public space would be desired. What were the barriers? Bringing the community together seemed like a clear barrier. Having enough sidewalk and public space to safely move through the neighborhoods and get to where people are going, which of course is the infrastructure part of this project as opposed to the activation. And on the other end of it, maybe too much success would be a problem, wanting it not to be too touristy or overcrowded that would take away from the existing charm of Edmonds. And now I just want to ask if anybody in that group wants to say anything that I might have missed in my summary. Thank you, Group 6.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can? I just want to add that I don't have an objection closing down the street, even Main, on occasion. Do things. I have no objection to that. I'd like you to know that. I think what I mainly don't want is the streeteries and no parking and no drive-through. My bank's down there. I have to come down to go to Chase Bank, is where I bank. So I need to be able to get there. That's why we need, one of the reasons we do things down there. Our water company is down there, our combined utilities are down there, our post office is down there. A lot of things are down there that we need to be able to get to. And but you know, I like your ideas. I like the alley ideas. I like some of the other ideas. You know, but we have to be able to get down there and park first. And I am not right now up here anyway, and down there too, from what I've been reading. I feel real bad about that too. Everyone, including the whole.
Enable mobility for everyone to access the downtown. Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Deborah. We do need to move on so that we can wrap up, but there, like we said, will be lots of opportunities. We're just at the beginning of the conversation, so please stay tuned for more times when we will be making decisions. Susan, did you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, let's, yeah, we would like to, if you are still on the line, please hold on, because we want to give you a website, and we also want to, it's okay, we also want to, you can go to the next slide. We also want to know which neighborhood you live in or work or spend the most time. So what neighborhood do you most identify with? So that would be, is that a Miro, is my understanding?
Let me share the screen and I'll do, it's a quick Mentimeter. Yep.
Thank you. Or thank you, Menti.
No problem. So it's the same Mentimeter. If you had if it's still open on your phone from before, you can go to that same, or if it somehow shut down, you just want to go to Mentimeter, menti.com, and type in, there's the code 950-23857. And here's just a recap of those 3 word clouds that we did from before: parks, coming through community, coming through markets, outdoor dining. And then the next 3 questions are about these 3 questions. So the first one is, what neighborhood do you live in? If everyone can vote there, we'll see everybody's dots populating, and this will help give us a sense about those next workshops. This is where we're planning to focus those efforts to figure out how these activation strategies work there. Great, that's where folks live. The next question is, where do you work? And then the third question is, where else do you go? Where do you run errands, spend your leisure time, go shopping, hang out? And this one you can, of course, do multiple, because that's how we are in our lives. All right. Thank you all. I will stop and we can go back.
And they can keep using Menti as for the next couple of minutes. So
Exactly,
so
that's
don't
right.
don't
They can
feel
go
like
back and add more words to those word clouds. Yeah.
so don't feel like just because we took the slide down that your opportunity is lost. You can take your time, answer those questions, because we really think that's valuable input. So the last slide is just how you can continue to keep in touch. We will be posting the neighborhood roundtable discussions very soon. And so please, if you want to stay up to date, if you want to hear about when those are, you can sign up for project updates at this link. We will also be outreaching significantly in the neighborhood. So you'll probably see posters, door hangers, and other means of getting to your neighbors within those communities. So watch this space. If you have any questions, please reach out. The email is there. Thanks for engaging in this beginning conversation. And I know a lot of people, a lot of voices talked about, look, we just want sidewalks, we just want lights, and we hear that. That is something that I take very seriously. And again, part of this work is creating street designs with standard infrastructure. That's not the conversation we're having today, but I just want to assure everyone on the call that just because we're talking about activation does not mean we're not giving attention to that permanent infrastructure, which is critical for livability within all of your neighborhoods. So thank you. If you want to stop sharing the screen, we can say goodbye properly with seeing any faces that may still be on. All right, so thank you so much for participating this evening. Again, we value your input and your time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Great to see you.